Hello, so today we're going to be looking at a BMW G20 330i that has a check engine light on due to an issue with the radiator blinds. So this vehicle is a 2020, only 40,000 miles on it, technically still under warranty. When the check engine light came on, it was taken into the dealership. They found that it was the radiator blinds being broken, causing a check engine light. Unfortunately, this is not covered under warranty due to the fact that it is a damage caused by rocks or debris in the road. In this case, if we look through the grills here, kind of hard to see, we'll see it with the bumper off, but one of the actual radiator blinds is broken right there. So that's going to cause a resistance issue, triggering a check engine light. The remedy is going to be to remove the bumper and replace that radiator fan or radiator blind. So the reason I'm making this video is I looked to do some research on it. There wasn't really anything out there, saw a need for it. So I'll do my best to show every step in the process. If you have any questions along the way, feel free to leave a comment and ask. So the first step before you're working on the vehicle is obviously going to be to at least get the front end of the vehicle in the air. In order to do this repair, like I mentioned, we do have to remove the bumper, and there are a series of screws in the fender liner. When you raise the car, it just gets you a bit more space. You should be able to do this without removing the front wheels and tires. Once it's in the air and the pressure is removed from those tires, you should be able to push on it, manipulate that left to right in order to access those screws. For the sake of the video, I am going to remove the front tires so that we can better see what's going on underneath the fender liners. So let me do that. Now, this should go without saying, but before working on the vehicle, make sure that the front of the car is properly supported. Use jack stands, slide the tires underneath the car if you need to, so you don't end up as another statistic of somebody getting squished under a car. So after we have those front wheels removed, there's going to be 4 8mm in this fender liner that we have to remove. 2 at the bottom, 1 kind of in the middle, 1 a little bit higher up. I'll show that in reference to the top corner of the bumper, and that's going to be the same on the other side of the car. We have 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those are all 8mm. Go ahead and get those removed. There are those 8 total screws. Once removed from the vehicle, you should be able to wedge your hand under the fender liner and get that pulled back all the way up to that top corner of the bumper. Once we've done that, we'll be able to access the 2 screws at the top there that actually fasten the bumper to the vehicle. If I go to the other side here, I have actually used a bungee cord to pull back the fender liner just for the sake of the video. So if we look at the corner where the bumper attaches to the fender, go up underneath, you'll see 1 and 2 8mm bolts that have to come out as well. Best way to do that is going to be to use a long 8mm socket, short if that's all that you have, and probably about a 6-inch extension. Apart from that, we need to disconnect that electrical connector as well as a temperature sensor in the back there. All right, here with the flashlight on, we should be able to see better. Once again, there are our 1 and 2 screws at the top there at about the intersection of the bumper and the fender. And then inside on the right side of the vehicle, we have this plug that's for the park distance control sensors. There's a tab on the top and bottom. Pinch those together and it should slide right out. It might take a little bit of wiggling, but shouldn't be all too difficult. And then just below it, we have a 2-wire plug. If you look down into the vent here, you can see the little prong of the temperature sensor that it is plugged into. That one just has 1 pinch connector on the inboard side of the vehicle. So we can grab that, squeeze that tab in, lift right up and get that disconnected. Once we do that, we can go get those 2 screws at the top of either side. Just take a note that those 4 screws, once removed, are quite a bit longer than the one's from the fender liner, so keep those separate. Remember that one's going back together. After removing those screws, we can grab the edge of the bumper and carefully kind of wiggle it up and down. Shouldn't need all too much force for this either, and you can get it separated from the fender. Once we do that, we can go ahead and do that on the other side of the vehicle as well. I don't know how well I'm going to be able to show this doing it with one hand, but one hand on this side, one hand kind of to support the bumper, and just give it a shake, and you can see it's already separating there. And with two hands used, I can get it pulled down and separated. After we've done that, we're going to need to get underneath the vehicle, and we have a series of 8mm all along the front edge of the bumper that we're going to have to remove. Now that I can get a better angle from underneath, we can see all of these 8mm bolts that we're going to have to remove. All these attach the front bumper to the different splash shields underneath the vehicle. Once all of those screws on the bottom side of the bumper have been removed, it's as simple as grabbing the bumper, giving it a tug. You can see how loose it is now around the front side here. We got it pretty loose. So now that we have it loose, I'm going to lower the car back down, and all that we have left is a couple of tabs underneath the headlight and underneath the grill here that hold the bumper on. Biggest thing with that is just be patient. You should be able to grab the sides of the bumper, give it a tug, give it a wiggle, and the whole thing should separate from the vehicle. When you're doing this, make sure you have somewhere you plan to set the bumper once it's removed. You don't want to set it paint side down on the ground and get it all scratched up. So maybe put a towel on the ground or have somewhere in the grass you plan to rest it. So like I mentioned, once you get all those screws underneath removed, it's just a matter of grabbing our loose ends here and kind of wiggling it to get it free from the headlights as well as underneath the grill there. So I found that the tabs underneath the headlights are quite a bit easier. You're just going to work your hand underneath the edge here, tugging, wiggle it up and down as you go. For me, these ones underneath the grill here were pretty stubborn. Be careful with it. The bumper is pretty thin. It's easy to crease it where the tabs attach if you're not being careful. What I found to work best is I grabbed one hand here, one hand underneath the bumper, and I kind of, while holding constant pressure outward, wiggle the bumper up and down, and you'll get each of these tabs to free one at a time without damaging them. Be patient here. If you're being too forceful, and like I said, really easy to crease the bumper. You'll see that in the paint. Want to avoid that. So on this particular vehicle, I'm finding that these tabs on the left side here are being particularly difficult to get to come out. It may be due to the fact that this vehicle is an aftermarket grill. It may fit a little bit tighter. It could just be that I'm not pulling hard enough and wanting to avoid damaging this bumper. What I'm actually going to opt to do is I'm going to remove this front grill here so that I can get a screwdriver in and release these tabs manually without damaging the bumper. If you don't have to do this step, great. If you find that it's being difficult, you don't want to risk damaging it, feel free to follow along. So the first thing that we're going to have to do in order to remove that grill is pull on and release this rubber gasket, after which we're going to have a series of these small black push pins that hold in this black cover right here. So go ahead and get that removed. If you don't already have one, they make a special tool for removing these. You can slide it under the small center pin like that, pull up, and then the whole plastic rivet should come out. I don't typically remove those center pins, but sometimes they come out. So we can go ahead and remove them like that, one by one. If you don't have this tool, a screwdriver will work. Just be patient. It's easy to break off the plastic around the top of these. So with all those black plastic push pins removed, all that's left holding it in are a series of tabs that are part of the piece that are held in on those three locations. The easiest way I found to remove this is by kind of pulling up on the front of it, bringing it towards you, and the whole part will come right out. After that, we have one, I believe that's a T30, right in the middle of the grill that we can remove, after which we have a series of tabs along the top that we can push down on with a screwdriver to release the top of the grill. So with that T30 removed, like I said, all we have to do is go and push down on each of these tabs There's 6 of them across the top, 3 on either side. I would recommend having one hand pull back and hold tension on the grill while you push down on each of them with, in this case, I'm using a flat blade screwdriver. You could use a Phillips screwdriver, a small pry bar, really just about anything that can depress those tabs. So I'll go ahead and get the other side of the top removed and we'll go from there. So here's a closer look at what those tabs look like once they're removed. I found a couple of these, even after being released from the hole, would get hung up farther back here. Just use 2 hands, wiggle it side to side, pull back on it. Once again, shouldn't require too much force. Once you get all these released on the top, there's one on either edge as well, and a couple of them along the bottom. You shouldn't have to release any of these manually, just go around tugging on it, you'll feel them release. Be gentle with it and patient, and you'll find that it releases. If the vehicle is optioned with a front camera, it would be located right there and have a plug going in the back. This car does not have that as an option. Go ahead and get that placed out of the way. Now we can see where each of these tabs goes into the bumper. I'm going to get my flat blade screwdriver, and you can work it under each of those tabs to release them manually rather than pulling on the bumper. So I'll go ahead and work my way around this side here. If you find that the license plate frame is getting in the way, feel free to remove that to get yourself some space as well. All right, so in my case, that made the job a lot easier. All I had to do is take my flat blade screwdriver, work it in the top here in order to release those tabs. You can see each of them along the top of the bumper here. Just go through and manually release those. If you have a second set of hands available, I'd recommend getting somebody to help support the ends of the bumper as you do this step. In this case, this bumper's pretty dinged up, got a lot of rock chips in it. I'm just going to set it on the ground like this. If you want to keep it real shiny and new, find a towel to set it on, place it out in the grass somewhere safe. So with the bumper removed, we can actually see our point of failure. If we get up inside here, you can see one of our fins on the flap is broken. Like I mentioned, this is really a pretty common failure. Even with the bumper there's big openings, a rock comes in, and this is the first thing that's going to break. So in my case, went ahead and bought a full new OEM assembly. It's the part number if you need it. And I purchased this through FCP Euro. It's got a lifetime warranty. I expect that this is going to be something that we are all going to be replacing quite frequently, being that it's the first thing that's going to get damaged. So next time this goes bad, I'll be able to ship back the broken one, and FCP will send me a new one for free. In order to actually remove and replace the part, there's a couple of fasteners, and as you can see, they're tucked up underneath this foam piece here. Really pretty simple to replace or remove. To remove it, I've already released this one side. On the other side here, there's just some tabs, so we'll pry back on that. There's one on the bottom, and then as we work around the part, there's a couple more, and we can wiggle it free and remove that. With that out of the way, we can pry up on the strap and access all the fasteners that hold this in place. Those look like they're going to be T30s as well. Go ahead and get those removed, and we'll go to there. So with those 4 T30 screws removed, the blinds are now free to move about, but they don't quite come out largely due to these 2 large tabs on either side. I did try to remove this black plastic piece here. It would allow it to move some more, but it was still being hung up on something in the back. So my recommendation and how I'm going to go about removing it is by removing these 2 screws here. There's one on either side, and they are a T45, after which this whole lower metal bar here should be able to come out, and we'll be able to remove the component. Once those 2 screws are removed, this component is free to come out of the car. As you pull it out, remember we have these tabs going through it, so the radiator blinds are going to need to move around a little bit to allow this to shift and come out. It's a lot easier when you have 2 hands to do it. So there it is, out. If you're using 2 hands, you won't have to deal with the whole radiator blind falling out like that. But once we do, we see that we have tons of room to work with. we can rotate it around and we have one electrical connector on the back. See the tab on the right side there? We'll pinch that in with our finger. Should unplug pretty easily and we can remove the whole part. With it removed, we'll go ahead and do a quick side-by-side with the new part that we purchased. Make sure that they look the same, have the same mounting locations. I always do this with parts I'm replacing, just make sure you didn't accidentally order or receive the wrong thing. Once again, with it removed, you can see that broken fin that was causing issues and actually causing a check engine light. So we'll go ahead, we'll get this plugged in, fished into place, and start getting everything bolted back together. So when we go to plug in the new part, that plug is only going to go in one direction. We don't have to worry about getting it flipped around side to side. Get that rotated up, make sure that all of our tabs are towards the top of the vehicle. And then we're going to rotate the top towards the back, and we can get that fished in. Once again, a little easier if you've got two hands to work with. As we fish it in, make sure that each of the tabs in the front is going underneath that strap, not tucked over it. Once we have that fished in, all of our tabs underneath the fabric strap, we can grab our small aluminum bar there, get it fished back into place and bolt it in. Make sure that we're moving this part to allow these tabs to slide into place over top that bar. Okay, I went ahead and got our bar fished in there. We got both of our tabs back where they're supposed to be located. Our 4 tabs on the top are still underneath that strap. If you find that you're having trouble getting this bar slid all the way back into place, check that the radiator blinds are located correctly in these plastic ducts here. If they're not, it'll get hung up. What we're going to do next is bolt in this aluminum bar. We want to make sure that we're doing this before putting in our top bolts. The reason for that being, once this is fixed into place, we're not going to be able to slide our blinds around to allow us to get that larger bolt in the bottom. So we'll go ahead and get our 2 T45s put back in. Okay, so when we're bolting these in, just be careful you're not putting too much pressure on here. If you're using a large electric ratchet, make sure you're not putting pressure on these fins. The last thing we want to do is break the new part before it's even fully installed. So get both of those 2 bolts in, get them tightened up, and then we'll go ahead and fish in all of our T30s across the top here. You may have to manipulate that strap a bit in order to get them in. So what I chose to do in reassembling is I threaded in all of those bolts but did not yet tighten them. The reason for that is this part has quite a bit of room. It can move up and down. I'm going to get all the bolts started, make sure that the strap is oriented on top of them, and then I'm going to hold it up in the middle of its placement and tighten everything down. After that, we can grab our foam support there. We need to slide that on. It shouldn't take much force at all to slide the tabs over. Once we get those zapped down, like I said, you can just press this on. Shouldn't take much force. Make sure it's pretty close to centered. It's going to affect the way that your bumper cover fits on. And then we can go and check this flange here. It's easy for pieces of it to get tucked up underneath it. Not a big deal, but we're here. Let's do it right. And then you can get your friend and grab the bumper and hang it back on there. You're going to start pressing it in from the middle, out towards the headlights, and then finally out towards the fenders. Once we have the bumper hung back on the vehicle, we're going to fish in each of these tabs. So if we look closely, the tabs will actually slide in there. It's really easy to accidentally start trying to fish it into this upper slot, but they actually go down there in the middle. So you can see each of them needs to be placed in there. If you have one of them misplaced, that part's not going to slide in. Easiest to start in the middle of the bumper, work your way out either edge towards the headlights. After a little bit of massaging, you should be able to get all the tabs across underneath the grille as well as underneath the headlights into place. We can put the pins on the corner here up into their holes. Get that fitted as well on both sides. As you work your way around, watch for the splash guards. It's really easy for them to end up kind of untucked, hanging underneath the bumper, as well as the center one. So as you work your way around, you may need to pull back on the bumper a bit. Make sure that they aren't hanging like this. Make sure they're tucked up underneath the bumper. Once we get all those on, we can fasten the 2 8mm on either side by the fender. Before we start putting bolts in, make sure that your gap here is closed all the way. It's really easy. You have those two pins there. They can be out of place. You don't want to start threading it in and put holes in your fender or anything like that. So make sure the bumper's pushed all the way up on the headlight, correctly located here, and then you can start fitting those screws up from the bottom. After putting our two screws in on either side, make sure to check your gaps here. There is some degree of adjustment that you can make by loosening and then holding this bumper where you want it and tightening it back down. After doing that, remember we have our two connectors here that we need to plug back in. One's for park distance control, the other is for our external temperature sensor. After putting those on, we can put our 4 screws back in the fender liner on either side, as well as all the screws on the underside of the bumper. My one note I'll make on putting these fender liners back into place, make sure that they're tucked back in under the bumper. You don't want this plastic piece laying on top of the painted part of that bumper on this bottom edge as well as up high. Get that in, make sure that all of our splash guards are underneath the bumper, or rather up on top of the bumper. Get all those screws placed in, and then we can get our wheels and tires put on, as well as refit that grille. Fitting the grille is going to be as easy as making sure that these lower tabs are lined up in their slots on the bottom, as well as the top, and then pressing it into place. I think I'll probably end up pulling off this license plate, give myself a little bit more room. After we get that pushed back into place, we have our one T30 on the top, after which we can snap our plastic shield back on top and put those push pins in it. So I did end up removing the license plate as well as the bracket underneath it. They just had Phillips head screws holding everything in order to get access to get the grill pushed back in. Make sure you get all the tabs on the top and bottom pressed in. Then we can take the plastic cover here, slide it into place, and install all of our pop rivets. These corners here do actually rest on top on either side, so make sure to get those pulled around. So I went ahead and got all those push pins back in. You can see this panel sits on top of the centerpiece there on either side. This rubber piece will just press on. There's a groove in it. Just press it back on all the way around, make sure it's roughly centered as well. Got the wheels on, those torqued down to 105 foot-pounds. And then we can go ahead and clear our check engine light, and we are good to go. If you have any issues or questions, feel free to leave a comment, and I can try to help you out as needed. Thank you.